Happy Tuesday, and welcome to the MSL Lead Chronicles. It's a podcast on a mission in medical affairs and leadership. I'm Mary Morton, and along with my buddy, Chad Fellers, we're going to have casual talk about important topics and challenges in leadership. And we are so glad you're here. Stay tuned.
Hello, and welcome back to another episode of MSL Lead Chronicles, a medical affairs podcast where leaders learn from leaders. I'm one of your hosts, Chad Fellers, and joined by my lovely sidekick, Mary Morton. And we are excited just for another episode. Mary, it's just a fantastic one that you had recently on Mother's Day. Again, I hope every mom out there had an amazing time away or relaxation, or maybe even chose to spend time with your kids. I'm not real sure on that. Oftentimes it's just getting a break from them, but nevertheless, hope you had a great weekend. Mary, just thinking about this, we've been on this journey about leadership development and all the different types of resources that are out there for leadership development, but even more specific around those geared for medical affairs professionals. And so I'm really excited about today's conversation that we're going to have regarding a resource that may be new to those that are either exploring medical affairs for the first time or have been in for years. And that's career and transition coaching. What is it? How can it benefit your career trajectory, et cetera? So I'm really looking forward to our conversation with our special guest today, who's focused on life sciences coaching. And with that, Mary, why don't you tell us a little bit about our guests?
I love that I get to do this. So our guest today is Leigh Holcomb, PhD. If you heard me talk about the best university on the planet in our last episode, I'm gonna tread very carefully here because we found Leigh at Texas A&M, but it's okay. We're all my son may end up at Texas A&M because he wants to study meteorology. But back to Leigh. Leigh is wonderful. In fact, Symbio was very fortunate to have placed her in her first MSL role. Super exciting. So I'm going to really let Leigh tell you a little bit more about her professional journey, but just real briefly, after being in the lab, became an MSL, did that for a few years, and then moved on to some other areas that fit her lifestyle better, and she can go into that. Became a recruiter, but for some reason our industry couldn't make her stay, and then moved on really into the role now that we're going to spend a lot of time talking about, and I'm really excited about learning more about that, and that is as the career and transition coach, as Chad shared a little bit with you. So, Leigh, I'm sure there's a lot of blanks that you can fill in a little bit there, and maybe we'll learn some through the conversation.
Like many people, I did the academic path. So I went to University of Southern California, did a master's there, had the Rodney King riots, so that made me decide not to live in Los Angeles, and I moved back to Tampa, Florida, and went to the University of South Florida. Finished my PhD. I got the cover of Nature Medicine with my first author research on Alzheimer's doubly transgenic mouse model. So great start to my academic career. Did a postdoc at Texas A&M and became an assistant professor in the psychiatry department there as part of the neuropsychiatry research program. So everything looked like it was on a good track. And we had gotten a $3 million DoD grant that I was going to be co-PI on. And my salary was subsidized by the VA hospital. So they had a shortfall. So they just decided to call in everybody that had a contract and say, we're going to give you 2 weeks notice. So I had a full lab, transgenic mouse model. My lab assistant had a baby under 2, and I had a baby under 2. And, your career kind of jumbled up at that moment. So fortunately, my department chair was able to get an extension. So we're like, okay, we're going to give you a year contract because you've got this huge grant coming in. And 2 months later, they called back in like we should never have given you an extension. And so basically, I waited and prayed a lot, and then they came back and said, okay, we'll honor it for you. But this is, how sometimes your best laid plans of your career path. I was going to, become a full professor with tenure. That was the goal. My first role with Cephalon was a neuroscience focused role. I stayed there for 6 years, and then the company was acquired by Teva. And so, like many people, you will go through this acquisition process at some point in your MSL career. And then I interviewed for a role at Genzyme, and Sanofi has acquired Genzyme. So 10 years total, MSL. And all the time I was a single parent. And so I had made a commitment working with a career coach that when my daughter reached high school, I would stay home and do something different. So I actually went back to teaching and then found a ad on Indeed for a recruiting firm. So I did that for 2 years. The pandemic happened. I went to work for a medical information company, and all the while had been working on a certification through the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching on career and transition coaching, and decided that I really just love helping people with their careers. And when I was a recruiter, I kept having people say, Leigh, I wish I had talked to you earlier in my career. So I kind of found the gap and also the passion where those came together. And I started my company called Career Catalyst Edge, and been full time in that for about 2 years now.
Leigh, again, thanks so much for joining us. We are excited to get into this discussion today. As tradition, as we can call it now, because we've had several podcasts now under our belt, we like to really first start with what are the key takeaways that you want our listeners to have from our conversation today. So let me turn it over to you, and maybe you can share what those would be.
So I would say number one is be prepared, because if anything is going to happen in pharma and biotech, is something's going to change. So make sure that you are taking control of your career by having your resume updated, your LinkedIn profile current, networking like crazy, and understanding who you are and what you bring to a company. So be prepared. And number two is network like crazy. So the reason I got into MSL role was because I talked to a sales rep, and she mentioned the job. And then I talked to somebody and they said, oh yeah, you've got the personality and the skills. And then I talked to somebody else and she passed me to a recruiter at SunBio. And because of these conversations, which when I had them, I wasn't thinking about becoming an MSL, they led me down a path. So network like crazy, because you're either going to be a blessing to somebody else or you're going to get blessed.
I love it. Awesome. Can't wait to dig in today. Here we go.
So one of the things that kind of struck me was, when you were talking about the loss of the grant. I mean, were you just completely blindsided?
Yes. Yeah. So the grant was tied up in the government shutdown, where they said we are going to give you money, and then you don't know when it's going to come. Mm-hmm. And then your salary is coming from someplace, and they decided that they had a shortfall, and so they were going to just cut the program. And I think that, I hear this a lot from people that have been laid off, that sometimes they just don't even know that it's an option. So, my motto is be prepared, because you just never know where life is going to take you. And so that's part of the coaching, is to be prepared for a transition, either whether it's planned or whether it's just kind of dropped in your lap. That's kind of the basis of my career coaching business.
Well, I mean, that's exactly what I was thinking is, I think a lot of people, when they're in academia, they're like, well, as long as I have my projects going on and I have my grant money, which usually, you have to work hard for, but it's usually there. Mm-hmm. I'm going to be good. The thought that I need to prepare for a career transition is probably not things people are thinking about a lot. So I thought, moving from there to my first question actually is, why should everyone consider or not even consider, why must everyone be thinking about putting like a career and transition coaching program in play for themselves?
So I think part of it is because we are innately good at certain things, and we often undervalue that. So the self-awareness component is really huge with working with a coach. Um, Sometimes you may not realize that there's a values misalignment with your workplace and where you are. You know you're overwhelmed. You know you're burning out. Since we're professionals with a lot of stick-to-itists, otherwise you would not have earned the roles you're in. We sometimes will just say, "Oh, things will get better." And so to have somebody that is not attached to the outcome, an outsider who can reflect back to you what you're saying and then help you really work through the what's important. Over time in life, your goals and your definition of success may change. So to be able to pause and really work with somebody on the, what do you want your life to look like, and how will you know you're successful, and are you including the people in your life that you want to? Work will take every ounce of energy you want to give to it. And then, as many people find, they may lay you off the next day. So to really look at the life integration, I don't usually use work-life balance because I think we're all going to be unbalanced at some point in time. We need to put a schedule in our career maintenance, just like your car. You're going to have a tune-up and do an oil check. One of my mentors said, "Leigh, I don't think you ever got credit for all the stuff that you did." And I was like, that quietly competent person is the one that typically is overlooked and really probably could be very much benefited from working with a coach.
It's interesting that the car maintenance analogy I think is really good, because I'm sure you've had clients that are like way behind figuring out what their personal and professional development plan is. And it's almost akin to not getting your oil changed regularly, and then something goes wrong and it costs you way more than those 3 or 4 oil changes would have cost you financially or professionally than if you had just been taking care of things all along. So I mean, I'm sure that's a really
good check engine light comes on. You need to do something. But if you don't know what that something is, then you really have a big problem.
So while we're on the car analogy, I'm wondering too, like almost this coach is similar to a driving instructor, if you will, in many ways, as far as having you trying to help close the gap from what you might read in a manual to seeing how it plays out in practice, and those types of things that just can't be communicated until you have real life experience. I think in many ways, that's the benefit of a coach. So many times, we even had I had this conversation earlier this week with one of my MSLs. The initial question was, okay, where do your interests lie in your next step in your career journey? And the response was, well, I think I want to be a people leader. I was like, okay, so first, tell me more why that you think that that's of benefit for you. Tell me. And we basically broke it down to the essence of, okay, the best thing for you to do is to think about where your strengths are, where you're really good, what brings you joy that doesn't feel like a job first. List those things out, and then we'll figure out the role that aligns to that. It may not be people leadership. It may be a component of it, but that may not be the specific charge. So in my mind, that seems very similar to kind of what you're alluding to about working through things as far as helping with a career journey. I think so many times it's so hard to get into industry. Once we get in, it's like we've arrived, and so the learning journey stops in many ways as far as how do we continue to advance. And oftentimes there's this big gap for years or maybe for our career. And so to set yourself apart, that's certainly a way to be able to do that, is through or having a benefit of a coach. Am I right?
Absolutely. And what coaches can do is bring tools that actually reveal to you what your strengths are. So one that I use is called the Harrison assessment. And so you can look at personality and preferences for different job types, for over 650 job types. So when I became an entrepreneur and a business owner, I ran it for myself as an entrepreneur. And then I also ran it for myself as a sales manager. And I put on my recruiter hat and I'm like, okay, part of my job is finding clients, making relationships with clients, pitching my coaching packages, and closing them. That's sales management, you know. And I scored high enough that I realized that I would be effective at it. You know, am I, a polished salesperson at this point in time? It's something I'm learning. But do I have the capacity? This assessment said yes. If I had been really, really low down on certain skills, I might have changed my mind about becoming a business owner and an entrepreneur. So, understanding the skills that are needed for the job, would you enjoy it? Because if you enjoy it, you're going to put the energy and time into it. And then also the challenges you might have. And so I think a lot of people have done the Gallup Clifton Strengths Assessment. So, my top 5 are ideation, strategic maximizer, relator, and input. All good things for being a scientist, all good things for being an MSL, all good things for being a recruiter, and all good things for being a career coach. I inadvertently created a career path that used my strengths. And then there are things that are on my end scores, like I'm not a spreadsheet lover. I'm not the kind of person who wants to create pivot tables. And knowing that gave me grace not to feel bad that I didn't enjoy doing it.
You just said a mouthful, but I think a lot of good takeaways from that. One is that reminds me, I think, of John Maxwell. The time that we spend our energy on, where do we focus? Do we focus in the areas where we're strong, and then really hire people that help support or make sure we have those support services to help close some of those gaps, and knowing your gaps. Would you say that is one thing that differentiates leadership from management? I know that they're both the same position, but I think we would agree that they're different functions, or they're different type of experiences. What are your thoughts on that?
So I believe that leaders see the potential in the people that work with them, and they help them to grow into that potential. And they give them the opportunities to fail into that potential, because there's that failing forward. The managers are a little more of the, here are your metrics, and we want you to make the metrics. Let's make sure you've got the skills or the resources to do these things. But, we want you actually to maybe stay in this role because you're good at the role, not necessarily saying that we want you to grow to something else and enhance your potential. So it may be a little bit of a different endpoint for people that are manager.
I have a bit of a question on when you were talking about the assessments, like a strength finders, or so have you sort of, as a career coach, become a human strength finders test, or is that part of what you do? Do you select one that you would like for them to take so that you can kind of help them guide themselves towards their potential?
I always give the energy leadership assessment, index assessment. So that's been generated through the Institute for Professional Excellence in Coaching, which is where I got my coaching certification. And it's listed by Forbes magazine as being one of the top leadership assessments. But unlike being a personality assessment, this is an attitudinal assessment. So as you show up at work, if everything is going well, you have certain filters, that you will see, somebody says, oh, can you come into my office for conversation? All right, things are going well. You're like, okay, great, But if you are in a really low energy state, your stress response, you're thinking back to all the things that could go wrong, or, what happened the last time your boss, sent you an email or said, come talk to me. So we need to know, where do we go under stress, and how long do we stay there? What are the things we say? And that is part of your professional development and growing as a person, is to be able to become resilient or anti-fragile, have a growth mindset. But you need to know where you are today. And so that assessment kind of is like the window to you. And you can actually take it over time and see the change that you've made. So if you've been working with a coach over time, you could repeat it in 6 months and in a year and see if the things that you've put in place to work on have actually had a change in your energy level.
I love that. And I think, especially with this being maybe Mental Health Awareness Month, um, having the opportunity to, even if you can't see yourself,
Right.
that I'm feeling this way because of this or that.
Right.
But having these black and white sort of results from this assessment tell you you're only feeling this way because of these circumstances. I made a note of that because I think I would love to jump into that myself, maybe give it to my kids, definitely my husband.
Yes.
But so how do you feel like actually, I don't know, Chad, if you had a question that you wanted to, I was about to ask her a question, but I feel like I'm monopolizing the questions.
No, you're good. You're
But
good.
you mentioned mental health awareness. So yes. Burnout assessment, I think, is really important, especially if somebody's been laid off, because we all say we're okay or we're fine. But to know how close you are truly to burnout, I think is important. And then the other thing that I'm really passionate about is neurodiversity at work. So I had a late in life ADHD diagnosis. I parent a kid with ADHD, dyslexia, and she has a math learning disability, dyscalculia. So understanding how your brain works and how, society may or may not fit your brain and your personality is important, because we all have our, other self, the things that people have told you throughout your life that you're not good at, or you shouldn't try this. And is that really you? Is that really what you believe, or is that something that somebody has told you? And I think when you work with a coach, you can really explore those sort of things. What is the real self?
The fact that you're some of the focus of your research was around psychological factors,
Yeah.
I think makes you probably even more uniquely an ace to do this kind of consulting, because it's better helping you better understanding somebody, but also helping them to better understand themselves. So thank you.
The MSL role that I was hired for was to support an ADHD medication. So my first conference that I went to, I heard Dr. Patricia Quinn speak about ADHD in women and girls. So this was well before I ever knew that my kid might potentially have ADHD. So I had that knowledge, which I actually could apply, to my life as a parent, and then myself later on in life, realizing that most women don't get diagnosed till over their 30 years to 40 years of age.
Oh, so it's your daughter?
Yes. So she's neurodivergent, and so am I. So I'm a neurodivergent neuroscientist.
And so am I.
Yeah, I feel like my family's keeping one particular company in business, because we're all taking their same drug, just different doses. Actually, I'm on a generic now, so I'm not keeping them in business anymore.
So, Leigh, follow-up question about this. When you talked about the assessments about what people are good and good at, so how do you navigate a conversation with someone that has started the journey with you, is interested in people leadership, and they really don't have, based on the assessments, really that's not going to be a strength. How do you have that conversation, and what does that look like?
Yeah, I think some of it is the why. The why do you want to be a people leader? In your mind, you have a picture of the outcome of your efforts in that role. We sometimes just think that that's the next rung on the career ladder. is that, if you're going to be successful, you need to move into a people management position. And is that true or not? Maybe there's something else that you could investigate in your company. I have one former MSL colleague, Danny Wells, who was my mentor, but she basically created a role which was like a liaison between the more clinical science component of the company and the MSL team, so that she gets to be the translator. And it was something it didn't exist, but it really fit her skill set and her passion and brought a lot of potential benefit to the company as a whole. So, maybe you don't need to be a people leader. You need to explore what else could you do and then come back. There's certainly training that you can take on how to manage teams. But the skills that we're looking at, 44% of the skills, according to the World Economic Forum, are going to be outdated by 2025. And so, the top 10 skills are things like, I got to read it because I won't remember everyone: analytical thinking, creative thinking, resilience, flexibility, agility, motivation, self-awareness. So that's definitely something that a coach would be able to help with. Curiosity, lifelong learning. So technology is kind of the number 6 thing, and that's really what we hire for initially, usually, is somebody's technical skills, rather than all these other things that we're calling soft skills.
Yeah, that's what I was just going to say. I tried to type them as fast as you're saying.
Yeah,
but we call them skills, but they're not really anything you can read on a resume, right? I mean,
yes, it would be very hard to be able to come up with a star format sometimes on your own that says, creative thinking. Well, if you came up with a new sort of role that fit the need that nobody else knew was there, but when you make it apparent, you can say, oh, this is how it's going to make life easier, make things faster, or save the company money. That's pretty creative thinking.
Leigh, I have to interrupt. I love
Sure.
this. I love this thought. I mean, it's similar to we had a conversation a couple of weeks ago with a thought leader. Oftentimes I think MSLs put their KOLs in this other category, like superhuman, or that they have all the answers figured out. And I think maybe we're making a mistake even as employees, that our company has things figured out as well, as far as the different roles and responsibilities. So I absolutely love the idea of taking the power of that and being able to communicate really a value proposition that can show that benefit. And those that really can separate themselves. I just love the idea of see a need, step into the need by proposing an option. So I think that's just great. That's just a great nugget to consider. I think oftentimes companies really only have one path or two. Seeing where the gap is with your current company could be an opportunity for you. And if it aligns with your skill sets, even the better, right? So thank you for sharing that. That was really, really insightful.
What I would love is if they would give you like an independent study project. So you could have a short period of time to go work on something you think you might be interested in as a future career path, so that you can actually find out what the day-to-day job is like. Because it's hard. They say, we're going to do your career plan beginning of the year, set your goals or whatever. If you've never done that kind of thing, that might be important to your promotion, but you've never even seen it demonstrated for you. I think that having like an independent study project type or mini internship would be very, very valuable.
I love it. Mary, you're thinking. I can see your thinking face.
I was wondering. I mean, you've been doing this career coaching for a while, but like you said, a couple of years dedicated solely to that. And I'm sure you're getting a lot of feedback from your clients. Can you tell me a little bit, or tell us a little bit, and all the listeners, how your clients are finding it to be effective, your career coaching services?
Absolutely. So my latest client, she actually just started interviewing when she hired me. So I actually found the two jobs that she was actually interviewing for. She went to final interviews, and this is her first opportunity going into industry. I've had other people that are looking for promotions, and so we sit down and really look at what are they bringing, what do they need to grow, how do they position themselves, and unfortunately, some people have been laid off, and so they need like a career boost, and so we do everything from resume rewrite, LinkedIn profile updating, activating your network, looking at the companies, because sometimes you don't even know what companies are out there that you might be a good fit for. So I am an extra brain and resource repository that people tap into. And the thing that most of my clients say is like, Leigh, I've never thought about it that way. I've never thought that my skills could fit this. My current client, I sent her the job ad and she said, well, I'm not sure I'm really qualified for this. And most women, if you're not 100% sure that you hit everything on that job ad, you may not apply. So I paused and I'm like, okay, let me tell you why, and I'm going to put my former recruiting hat on, why I think you're an excellent candidate for this job and why I think you should apply for it. Yeah. I think some of it is getting them out of their heads because they're looking for the ideal job. You have to really look at what's open in the market now, and do you fit enough to be a good candidate? And if you're lacking some things, what is it that would boost your job, possibilities for the future?
It's something I've noticed, and I'm curious if you have too. The previous generations stayed at their job for 10, 15, 20, gold watch, all that good stuff.
Yeah.
So they didn't interview a lot. Interviewing is an art, wouldn't you say? But as you're talking about wanting to prepare people for their own personal future growth, career, and transition, some of those people, unfortunately, who haven't interviewed in 15 years are not as good at interviewers as the job hoppers, because the job hoppers interview more. When you're advising people, I assume this has got to be part of it. And one of the other great benefits that you worked as a recruiter, so that you did that as a recruiter already. So how are you kind of managing through that sort of delicate situation?
Yeah, some of it is actually just getting them on the camera to talk about themselves, because that's not something we typically do a lot, and that first tell me about yourself question is really a make or break. But if you've not really reflected on who you are and what you bring and why this role, why this company, that's really, I think you've probably heard as a recruiter, it's like, I don't really know why they want this job. And that seems to be the kiss of death sometimes in that interview process. Yeah. And so really the breaking apart what is the role, and is it something you would enjoy doing? Is it something that you have the skills to do? And then beyond that is what is the life you want to create? And is this particular role in congruity with what you think you want your life to be?
And
I like it.
Oh, I'm sorry, Chad.
Why are you sorry? Don't be sorry.
Okay. I'm not sorry.
I forgive you.
Thank you.
I accept your apology.
Thank you.
Okay. Can we move on?
Yes, I thought there was just going to be more.
Oh, okay.
But continuing on this path that we're kind of just on, some employers, some of the big pharmas, I would think, probably do, will actually pay for your coaching services, I would guess, when they're in transition, or even maybe not, just as part of professional development. People get so much of their own personal budget to go to, for any kind of professional development, go to a conference, go to whatever. So what are, from what if you're seeing data showing in terms of the benefits of career coaching for an employer?
So part of it is helping the employee understand their strengths and benefits so that they actually are bringing their best self to the workplace. Let's face it, we're all stressed. Some people may be close to burnout. And so, working on that well-being component with a coach is important. Employee retention. If a company is providing professional development, people are more likely to stay there. And especially the younger generations, they are expecting employers to provide that. So that should be a budget item, actually, for companies. As a recruiter, how expensive it is to replace somebody. And also the potential to bring in new skills as well. If you have time to work with a coach to figure out where the growth opportunity is for you, that the company can help have the employee right size the job for them. So, maybe the initial job description was these 5 things. Over time, we keep adding in additional skills or jobs or, projects, understanding what you're going to be really good at and what are the ones that you should say no to. My last employer, I got a lot of questions about, do you have the capacity to do this job? Adding in another thing on my plate. And some of it was like, yes, I think I can do it. I have the skills. The other part is that's going to take time and energy on top of what you're doing. Let's prioritize and go, okay, if I take this on, which you're saying now is top priority, what's going to come off my plate? What's going to come off my schedule? And to also really have some concrete goals on how does this particular thing help me with my career development? Because a lot of people, they just say yes to everything and then they burn out.
So, I think at the beginning of your career, yes, career coaching is important. I think people overlook the value of having a career coach in the middle of your career.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah.
And I don't know if there are any statistics around this, but what do you think are the costs of not taking career planning seriously?
So when I transitioned from my first MSL role to my second MSL role, I had been 6 years in my first MSL role. And then I talked to a recruiter and he's like, a lot of people do switch around 3 to 4 years. And if you had changed at that point in time, you might have gotten, 10, 15% increase in your pay. Whereas if you stay with a company, it might be a 3 to 4% increase in pay. So if you look at financial, that's one component. The challenge, when you hit mid-career, you may be a sandwich generation where your parents need help, they're aging, and you may have kids that are in school and you've got sports and you've got all that other kind of stuff. And then you've got work. So how do you actually prioritize where things are going? And, at some point in time, we usually just stop sleeping. So that's the health component, is really looking at what are you doing that's going to help you live a long time in a healthy manner? Or is this work that you've chosen to do really draining you to the point where your physical, mental, spiritual well-being is impacted?
Yeah, I think about that myself, because I'm 55 now and I'm thinking, I wish I had done this before. I'm working with a client right now that is incredible. And the chief development officer is probably 15 years younger than me. And she's a dynamo. And I'm like, wow, how I've been wasting my life, because she's incredible. Like, why didn't I take more chances, when I was much younger? And why, I'm pretty happy with where I am right now, but I'm just speaking for myself. I think it's you professionals are cheating themselves by not having somebody like you in their corner who can put it all into perspective. So
I was even thinking, kind of similar to that line, those lines, Mary, about do we settle too much? Maybe we settle for um, mediocre or happiness, or obviously, I don't want to live to work by any means, but there's so much time invested in it. I want it to be something that brings me satisfaction. The majority, obviously, there's no such thing as a perfect job, and there's going to be parts of things that we have to do and maybe not want to do. But how many years wasted knowing that you can, or every experience you can utilize, or you can help set you up for the future, but how much of that is can you condense it to get where you want to be quicker? And I think that's one of the things, we get stuck in our ways. We get complacent, and we don't have that. And to Leigh's point earlier, we find ourselves reaching out when it's in desperation versus trying to really find a job that's aligned with our strengths or bringing our satisfaction as well too. We're operating out of fear versus freedom. And so how can we operate more out of freedom? That's what you're suggesting in essence right now, is or that's what I'm hearing at least, is how do we operate in that mode to where we're in control of our future. I think life is too short not to be happy, and find that. And so I think the coaching is a way that can certainly accelerate that process, to help people identify that kind of need. So thanks for the feedback. That's really good.
Yeah, there's a concept in positive psychology called flourishing. So are you flourishing in your life, or are you languishing in your life? And so, we need to pause. It's like taking your temperature. Do you have a fever or not? Are you healthy or not? The work component of life sometimes takes over everything, and we don't look at the whole. So I have something called the Wheel of Life that looks at lots of different domains of life, and you rate your satisfaction in it. And, so like, let's take family, for example. Some people will say family is really important to them, but they never see their family. Is what you're doing matching what you say you value? And let's really put some numbers down there and evaluate that. I just went for my own personal professional development to the Women, Life, and Science Conference, which is the first annual conference that they had here in Greenville. And it was founded by two women, one's a CEO and one was a COO, to help women with their professional careers. And a concept I had not heard before, it's called the sticky floor, where you get in your first entry-level job, and sometimes you get stuck there. My dad went to one job, stayed there until he retired. That was success in his generation. My generation, 10 years here, 6 years here, whatever. We knew we would have some transition, but it's all been kind of in the same trajectory. And then I went to a conference and I had somebody say, your kid every 2 to 3 years will be changing jobs, whether it's a new project at the same company, whether it's a promotion, whether it's you've lost a role, or maybe you've just decided you don't want to do that anymore. Or, we have things now like ChatGPT and AI, things that never existed before.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a new career.
Best friends with ChatGPT.
But oftentimes we're driven by the dollar and we think that is success. And what I'm hearing you say is, if we can live in our strengths more, we'll be happier, more satisfied, and then also be more impactful. All those things will take care of itself. So I think that coaching helps put someone in a position to know themselves better, and you're helping point them in the direction with that. So you've given me a lot to think about. about this. I love the idea of flourishing or languishing. That is
But
such a good thing. What,
I
Mary?
think I think what I'm sorry. I think what also Leigh was saying though is that that's not going to be the same with every person. So
Correct.
she and her coaching services helps them figure out
Yes.
whether they care, whether how personally happy they are because the money's more important, or if they're languishing so much that the money is not important anymore. I need to do something that makes me feel awesome and
Yes.
fulfilled in my job. So she's like the angel on your shoulder, or
Horse whisperer or whatever that is, right?
horse
The
whisperer.
MSL or the medical affairs whisperer.
The
There you
medical
Yeah.
go.
affairs whisperer. Yeah.
Well, that would be a good tagline.
I love it.
Okay.
I love it.
Yeah. Well, I have one last question, and it's going to pull from your psychology background. When we were talking about the generations staying one place this long, and then this long, and then this long, and like this long, and I I noticed with my own kids, and you maybe too, how that's also their attention span, like for everything, for like like my son would much rather watch 110-minute long YouTube videos than a 2 hour movie. And so psychologically, I'm just curious if you see that as being generational, and on top of that, as a part of your coaching service, do you try to talk to them about this is why you look at things in the short stints, and maybe you can consult with them on how looking at things differently might improve their outlook on their careers and what they want to do.
Yeah, and so some people are novelty seeking, and some people are stability seeking. That they have those as values, and understanding do you need to get that at your workplace, or can you engineer it into the rest of your life?
Oh,
And I mean, Chad's used the word impact a lot, and that's actually my word for the year is impact. And
All
so
right.
I use my skills for the greater good on the board of director of Rise Prevention, which goes into middle schools to teach kids how to live a drug-free life and gives them the resilient skills to be able to say that I'm choosing to be healthy rather than use these substances. And then I also have been asked to be on the board of directors for Just Be, which is an autism-focused nonprofit here in South Carolina. And as of today, they just got the Just Be logo put on the license plate so that you can be a family member or a person with autism or neurodivergent, go into a database. And so if you were stopped by a police officer or first responder, they could have access to your profile. And so that you could be approached with no flashy lights, no sirens.
that's amazing.
Wow.
It is first in the nation, and I believe it's going to be best practice over the time. But when I look at making a difference and making impact, that is what truly brings me joy. And and that's one reason why I loved being an MSL, was because sometimes you are bringing knowledge to people that they need, and they're busy professionals, and it can potentially impact patient care immediately. Yeah.
That's wonderful.
Yeah.
I love it.
Yeah.
Leigh, this has been so good.
Thank you.
I really appreciate your willingness to hop on and join us for our casual conversations for all things medical affairs. I've learned a lot today. A lot of things have stretched me. A lot of things are affirmation of what we have been tasked to do. Mary and I think we've been tasked to do as far as supporting and being a venue to help with leadership development, specifically within medical affairs. And I'm so glad you were willing to join us to share a little bit about your journey and how the benefits of having a career coach. And so I think that this is great. Do you want to give your information one more time to our listeners so they can potentially find you on either LinkedIn or your website?
So my LinkedIn profile, you'll have Leigh Holcomb, PhD. My website is careercatalysedge.com. And my email is drlee@careercatalysedge.com.
I love it. I love it. Thank you so much for joining us. Really appreciate your time. To the listeners out there, thanks so much. We know that there's a lot of great information. Can't wait to hear feedback, thoughts, and then even ways to move forward. We're always open to suggestions on how we can help support you, different topics, etc. So thank you for bringing those to our attention. Continue to do that. Please feel free, or please be sure to follow MSL Lead Chronicles on the LinkedIn page. We would love for you to be an active participant there, because the reality is leaders don't develop in isolation. Leaders develop from leaders, and that's our charge and what we want to do. And we are excited that you're along in our journey. So until next time, have a great one and lead well.